going to get exciting next week because we're going to be dealing with some really important questions. But we're in AD 30, event 12, Tuesday and Wednesday, leading into the crucifixion. We find this in Matthew chapter 24, verses 1 through 3. We find it in Mark chapter 13, verses 1 through 4, and Luke chapter 21, verse 5 through 7. Well, Jesus has been teaching in the temple. He's dealt with the Sadducees, he's done with the Pharisees, the scribes. He's dealt with all of the different groups of people and answering their questions and then asking them some questions to put them on the spot and leaving them all silent, mad as hornets, but silent. And now he comes out of the temple, and evidently he's on his way back up to be out of the city during the nighttime hours, and as he often did, headed probably towards Bethany. Nevertheless, he's around someplace, probably going up the Mount of Olives. And his disciples are looking back at the temple. And it's really interesting when you look at all three accounts. They're looking at the beauty of the building, the temple building. And Mark says the wonderful stones, the wonderful buildings. And in Luke it says the adornment and the beauty of the temple. It's interesting, isn't it? They're really impressed by the temple. And Jesus kind of shakes them right to the core. In verse 2 of the Matthew account, he says, not one stone here should be left upon another. That's incredible, isn't it? Well, how did that all play out? Well, there are three things that you ought to see from this particular section of Scripture. The first is the temporalness of things and places. Jesus says, don't get too enthralled with the temple. It's not going to be around. I think sometimes we all get enthralled with buildings, churches, edifices, beautiful things that we see here on earth. It's all temporal. Read ahead to the book of Revelation. Man, it's just going to all be torn apart. Second thing you want to notice is they seem to think about this place as being special and holy. It's not the place, it's the person. It's not the place where we worship, it's the person that we worship. So they're going to learn about temporal things. They're going to learn about places not being important, but who they worship. But then they're also going to see some prophetic things about all of this. Jesus is looking ahead, not all that many years, AD 70. What happened in AD 70? What made this prophecy come to pass? Well, the zealots of the Jews had been stirring the people up. The Jews themselves weren't very happy, and there was a rebellion and a kickback against the Romans going on in Jerusalem and throughout Israel. And so the Roman general Titus decided that he'd put this all to a stop. It's a pretty good strategy. He waited till Passover, let all of the people pour into the city of Jerusalem, then he wouldn't let them out. He started sieging the city until they ran out of food and water and started fighting amongst themselves, the zealots with the others. And it was an easy takeover at that point. Now, it was 4 years that this had been going on, and he had an easy time taking over Jerusalem. And then they burned and destroyed the temple because they saw that as the heart of the place for the people. Now, there's a lot of speculation about the one stone upon another. Obviously, this huge edifice almost couldn't possibly be torn down so there wasn't one stone on top of another. But perhaps he was talking about the temple proper, which was a fairly small building in response to all of the porticos and all of the courtyards and everything else. In any case, there's been speculation and writing by Josephus and others that when they burned the temple, that the gold that was in there melted. And there's always somebody that wants that last little bit of gold that was melted down when the temple was set afire. and that they literally pulled stones apart to get gold that had seeped into the cracks between the stones. Well, I don't know if that's an exaggeration or not. Nevertheless, the temple was utterly destroyed. I mean, there is good historical evidence that this event really took place. And so we don't have to worry about the literalness about one stone upon another and whether it was the entire complex or whether it was just the holy place and the Holy of Holies. But in any case, the next thing that happens is we have either two or three questions. It depends on how you want to look at it. For Jesus, I think it was three questions. His disciples, as they were sitting on the Mount of Olives, and it tells us when we look at all three accounts again, that the disciples that were there were Peter, James, and John. They were talking to Jesus privately and obviously thinking about this final destruction of the temple. And they said, when will these things happen? They said, what will be the signs of your coming? And they said, when is the end of the age? Now, they may have thought that that one question that was in their mind was not three questions. But realistically, Jesus, when he took their question, had to see it as three questions. When will the temple come down? What is the sign of your coming? And when is the end of the age? And so we find one of the most controversial and debated sections of Scripture as we look at chapter 24 of Matthew about the end times and how these three questions may have been intermingled in his answer. As he wasn't going to give a timeline, but he was going to tell them the answer to their questions. And so stay tuned and watch and see how Jesus answers what appears to be not two questions, not one question, but three questions. When will these things happen to the temple? What is the signs of your coming? And when is the end of the age? And that's my thought for the day. Be sure to go to church tomorrow, Sunday, and be sure that you attend Sunday school as well and learn more about Jesus and his desire for obedience to his commands. And be sure to follow through with witnessing to others, because that was one of his primary commands. As he gave his last commission to us, he said, go into the world, make disciples. I hope you're going to be doing that. And I hope you'll not wait till Sunday to do it, but I hope you'll be doing it every day of your life. God bless you. That's my thought for the day.